And today, really what I want to do is start off by just telling you a little bit about the company and the work that we do. Just give you a sense for the type of services that we provide, the clients that we serve, give some examples of some case studies of some projects that we do. And then I'd like to open it up to the attendees today to do a little bit of an interactive case study. Just give you an example of the type of problems that we solve. Depending on how many people are here, we may have a couple of breakout sessions, or we may just have you all in one group, just kind of thinking together about some questions that I'll pose for you, and we'll come back and have a little bit of a discussion and work through that case together. I'll then wrap up with some lessons I've learned from the field, things that I never knew when I was still in business school and that I learned as an actual consultant, and then we'll open it up to all of you to see if you have any questions. So as I noted, Shift Health is a company that is, it's a strategy consulting firm that is exclusively focused on the health research and innovation ecosystem. One of the key differentiators of our firm is that we exclusively hire people that started their career in research. Everybody in the company all consulting staff have a graduate degree in the life sciences, and some other sciences as well, but they have a graduate degree in science. The vast majority of PhDs, some such as myself, have a master's, and we look to kind of bring that together with business acumen, either through an MBA, industry experience, or even just simple on the job training at Shift Health as you get immersed into various projects. We really think about our work across 8 main service areas. The first is corporate strategy. This is very classic. This is what you find in pretty much any strategy consulting firm. But the only difference here is that we're really just exclusively focused on organizations that are in the life sciences sector. Research strategy, this is something that's somewhat unique to our firm, really working with academic health sciences centers and research institutes to help them to define their research foci, understanding how they can position themselves competitively in the global research arena in order for them to secure funding, attract talent, and ultimately make an impact through their research. Product strategy, this is really working with pharmaceutical companies to understand how they can position their product competitively in various markets. That's everything looking at reimbursement and pricing policies within various markets, understanding what the competitor landscape looks like. And in a lot of cases, this is actually, these types of strategies go all the way back to informing the clinical trial strategy and what type of target profile they'd want for their product in order to be competitive in the market. And opportunity assessments, really this is our work with the investment community, working with those who are looking to buy either biotech startups or invest in particular technologies, really trying to get a deep understanding of the unique technological advancements of a specific technology, understanding how it compares to what else is on the field, looking at what new products are coming out in the pipeline, and using all of that to create a robust financial model that will allow investors to make a decision whether to invest or disinvest in a product or a company. Policy strategy, this type of work really is important because, as you know, the healthcare sector, the life sciences sector in general, is very regulated, and working with governments on everything from understanding pricing and reimbursement to the way that they're thinking about investments in various research sectors is important to many of the organizations that we work with, and really helping them to shape the policy dialogue with government interlocutors in order to have to create a favorable policy environment for their strategies. Partnership strategy, this type of work really is helping to develop a strategy and oversee, in many cases, very large and complex networks or consortium of partners that come together to solve the big problems. One example of this type of work is we oversaw the world's largest HIV vaccine clinical trials and that involved a partnership between various national governments, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a number of various industry stakeholders coming together in a very complex partnership model. Program evaluation, this is really just working with clients to understand how well they're doing, developing scorecards, understanding how they're performing, and giving them some insights on how they can improve going forward. And then finally, proposals and pitches. This is really just helping our clients raise funds in a lot of ways, and whether it's from investors or from government, just really making a business case for investments. One of the great things about working at Shift Health is really the diversity of clients that we work with. We work with governments, and that might be the equivalents of ministries of health, ministries of research and innovation, ministries of economic development at the provincial or national level, academia. This is for the most part universities and research institutes, not-for-profit sectors like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as I noted before. So really not disease-focused, not-for-profit organizations. Industry, which these days really represents our largest client base. We work with the top 5 pharmaceutical companies in the world, and primarily working with their global headquarters. Unfortunately, here in Canada, there's not a lot of R&D that's happening. It's primarily sales and government relations. So for the most part, we are working in Europe and the United States in that area. And then, of course, care providers. And this is usually academic health sciences centers, but it could also be community hospitals that have aspirations for starting to establish research programs. Just a quick highlights of our track record. The firm was established in 1999. We're now over 20 years in business. We've served over 300 clients over the years, helped to raise over $2 billion to support health research and development. And we've helped to successfully implement over 50 R&D partnerships. I'm going to go into just a couple of case studies just to give a little bit more of the flavor of the work that we do. This first one really is a project that I've worked on last year, actually. We do a lot of work in the Middle East, particularly in the Gulf, working a lot with the Saudi government, with the government of Qatar. But this one was a very interesting project because we were working with all 6 countries of the GCC in order to create a regional public health agency. So I guess the equivalent of the CDC in the US, except this was a regional body that would serve all 6 countries. One of the real complexities of this was that each of the countries were at various stages in the maturity of their healthcare systems, the level of expertise that they had in public health, their working relationships with each other. So really what we were developing was a strategy that would allow them to come together through this body, serve the unique public health needs of the region and each individual country. We developed a full strategy, business plan, all the way down to a full budget and job descriptions. Actually, my president is in Riyadh now. It's the first time he's been there since the pandemic, meeting with this client to talk about the next steps of supporting them in bringing this vision to life. This next work is about an example of our policy strategy work. This is on behalf of the global headquarters of one of the world's leading pharmaceutical companies. There are many experts around the world are really seeing the power of data and the need for us to really tap into the wealth of data that's being generated in this knowledge era to advance personalized healthcare, allowing us to connect data from our wearables and apps with the medical records in our doctor's office to genomics data about our genomic sequences, as well as with clinical trials, bringing it all together to really start to generate insights about opportunities for prevention, the way that diseases work, the efficacy of various therapies in order to improve the overall effectiveness of our healthcare system. Of course, this is extremely scary and risky business. People are very trepidatious about sharing their data, especially personal data like this health data. And making the case for government is a very difficult task. So we worked with this client. We studied about over 1,000 evidence sources, looking into academic literature, looking at the gray literature, various reports published by various governments, in order to understand what the evidence tells us about the value of this type of work, tell us a little bit about some of the risks that were emerging, some of the opportunities and initiatives that are taking place around the world, and ultimately making an evidence-based case for them to use as they begin to start their discussions with governments about modernizing data policies in order to usher in this future for the healthcare system. And then just the last case study that I'll highlight is really one of our work for investors. Here we worked with a large institutional investor in understanding the potential future royalty streams of a portfolio of 9 different products. This required us to get on the phone and speak with various clinicians to understand their thoughts on how the treatment paradigm was changing for each of these different disease areas, taking a look at the pipeline of new products that were coming to market, particularly generics that had the potential to disrupt the market with lower prices, understanding, I guess, how each of these products were currently being positioned in the market and what their current streams were, and using all of this to develop a very complicated financial calculator that allowed for different scenarios to be tested to understand whether or not this was a worthy investment. Ultimately, the clients took the information that we provided them with to make a confident investment of $300 million in this portfolio. So that's just a little bit of a flavor of what we do at Shift Health and the type of work that we do. What we'll do now is maybe start to transition into a little bit of a case study that provides just a real classic example of a Shift Health project. So I'll leave this up on the screen for everybody to see, and I'll leave it up to Satyam to decide whether maybe it's 2 groups that we could split up into, or maybe it's just one big group. But what we'll ultimately be looking to see is imagine a scenario, and this is actually based on a real project that I had done many years ago. There was a number of academic centers, hospitals, municipal governments in Northern Ontario that were looking to come together to create a research network. And they needed to understand what disease areas they should focus on in order to have the most impact, in order to be able to secure the greatest amount of investment from government and other funders, in order to really engage all of the various clinicians and patients even in the region in research and get them excited about something that they really didn't have a strong track record in to begin with. So we were tasked with coming up with an overall research strategy for this network. And one of the things that we were asked to do by the Vice President of Research and Innovation was to identify 3 main health research areas. So, is it diabetes? Is it obesity? Are we looking at something like telemedicine? What is the area that we should be focusing our research on? So the question that I have for you to think about is, what type of information would you need to support an evidence-based decision on these potential research foci? So for example, I'll give an easy one off the bat. One thing that you'd want to look at for sure is just the demographics of the region and what is the population health of the people that live in Northern Ontario. What are the main kind of diseases that are really affecting the lives of people there? That might be a good starting point for thinking about what these research areas would be. And then once you've thought about each of these types of evidence that you'd want to look at, the next thing I'd want you to think about is how would you go about gathering information about these areas? So what are the sources you'd use? Are there any kind of public sources, any kinds of reports, any databases that come to mind? Are there people that you'd want to talk to? How would you go about gathering this information in order to make this decision? And then finally, imagine that you did come up with the 3 research areas. How would you go about characterizing the impact of the investment in these areas? So how would you talk about investment in these areas to potential government funders in a way that would get them excited about making investments in this research network? So I'm just looking at the time now. It's 22 past the hour. So maybe if we want to take a break for maybe till 35 past or so, and then we can come back. And what I would ask is if for each group to upfront nominate, or for somebody to volunteer to become kind of a note taker and a spokesperson, and then be prepared to come back and share their thoughts with the group. and we can see what you came up with.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. I'm just dividing into two groups. I think we have like around 9 to 10 people. So I'm just switching and opening all the rooms, and see you all in 2 minutes. It's really cool to see, Charles, like the project that I was specifically thinking on the Gulf side. That's a really interesting. There are different models, like different governments trying to have a centralized center of disease control.
Yeah,
That's an interesting aspect. Like, how did the project came to you, or like how did you found out about that project? How did you build up like that project work?
sorry, how did we learn about the project to begin? How did we get
No, I would say, like, how did you find about such necessity? How did you pitch the idea? I'm always curious, right, about how these projects develop. So
right. This is one of the ones, these type of large, especially these kind of like large Saudi projects, I'll call them, at a very high level. They always originate from the client, and they're always a huge RFP, and it goes to tender. You're competing against McKinsey and BCG and all these guys. So it's typically, and more often than not, it's the last consultant they worked with that tells them to do the project. And then, and usually what happens is that consultant gets the project, but in some cases, like in this one, it goes to somebody else like us, because it's a great win. But typically those types of projects are originated from the clients or the consultants that they last worked with.
Oh, that's really great to know. So I really get excited because that sector, I would say, like Asia Pacific, like has a lot of health innovation and stored in a lot of capital, plus like a lot of talent there, which can, actually ramp up and change, and can be a new innovation front to like 3.0 that we
Right.
call in health innovation. So always curious and always try to look forward their opportunities there. So, yeah.
Are you at the school now?
Yeah, I'm just in my lab, so I'm just wrapping up my day. So it's 5, and then I have another the engagement I'm working on, which is helping Accelera on working on some proprietary drug targets. Again, opportunity assessment. So that's something I would say I got it, and I'm learning a lot. So it's fun leading that project and helping a team which is very diverse. So normalizing the knowledge in a way, like, make them understand the scope of the project. So it's a pretty good experience that I'm having. I think we will give our final presentation 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
So just looking forward to it. Really interesting project.
That's great.
Yeah. It's like 8:31, so I'll just let them know like how many more minutes do you want to give, like 2 or 3.
Yeah, something like that. That sounds good. Yeah.
Are you planning to expand to other offices outside Toronto, like as a office, or are you just thinking of operating?
I mean, it's probably something there was a point in time when we were going to open up a Saudi office because of how much work we did there. And then there were some kind of complications that prevented us from opening it. But, to be honest, after the pandemic, I don't know. I think that we've kind of proven that you don't need to work. Like, we're excited about moving back into our new Toronto office when it's done.
Yeah.
But right now we've even hired some people that don't live in Toronto.
Yeah.
Although they are planning on moving to Toronto once we open.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm interested to see where the world goes and the philosophy about physical space after the pandemic. I think there's some schools are saying, you know what, we're never going back to the office. You do what you want.
Yeah.
And some are forcing people back and saying, nope, we need you back. The pandemic's over. So we'll see.
Yeah. It's just excited. Yeah.
Classes are normal back to, oh yeah, you know what, you guys are all back, you're back to normal out there in BC, right?
Yeah, UBC, like, yeah, the on campus it's classes are there, but as a PhD, like you don't need to take courses after first year, right? You just complete. So I would say, and also specifically, I'm not on UBC campus. I'm like, so UBC is in one corner, so I'm on like the main area where the hospital is, Vancouver General Hospital. So I would say it's always the same that it has been since 2022. So
Right.
it's the same amount of people. Labs never closed, right? So it's just that we had to time in and worked around the clock. But right now, I would say, yeah, labs are also at full capacity. Everybody is wearing masks, though. That's mandatory.
Okay. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'll just let everybody know. Close all rooms. I
Yeah.
think. Welcome back, everyone.
Okay. Is everybody back in the room, Satya?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hope you had some chance to have a little bit of a discussion. I don't know if room one wants to go first. I don't know who the spokesperson for room one is.
I believe that's me. Yes, so in our limited amount of time, basically we solved the problem for you. So we're hoping that we can, you can use
Amazing.
it. Anyway, so yeah, we talked about basically looking at, you know, complex chronic diseases, like you mentioned.
Can we share our slide deck?
Oh, wow. Okay, if you can, if you have one.
Caleb, are you okay to share on your end?
Can I? Let's see here. It's disabled right now.
Caleb, now you can. Now you
Okay.
can do it. Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, it won't let me because it's already being shared. Anyways, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so the three that we came up with were complex chronic diseases, things like diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, that kind of stuff. That is really kind of like costing you a lot of you know, resources on an ongoing basis, long term. Second would be Indigenous health access, and that, you know, everything related to that, and women's health would be the third one. And falling under that would be things around, you know, perinatal disease processes and stuff like that as well would be a big thing to look at. In terms of the information that we would need, it would be, you know, demographics. What's the information available right now? It would be, you know, incidence, prevalence relative to that population, might be an increased incidence. So just off the top of my head, things like FASD, likely in Northern Canada. You would be looking at the, you know, cost impact. What are the allocated resources? Where are the gaps in service? That kind of stuff. And who's missing out? Who, you know, even things like difficult to fill positions, job postings, that kind of stuff for service providers. Second, how to gather the information. That's going to be a huge challenge. It's probably going to cost some dollars. I know that there's the Northern Ontario School of Medicine that, so you may be a partnership with them would be instrumental within the network with the Southern universities as well, hospitals, clinics. There are some networks in Northern Ontario, and there's a few private care providers too, if they're willing to provide some support. You would want to be looking at so yeah, for the third part, how to characterize the investment. I think the big piece is going to be health outcomes, and the second one would be what's the impact on Southern service providers, in the sense of a lot of these people end up going down south for service. And so what's the decrease in burden for, or potential decrease in burden for Southern service providers?
That's really great. Well, I like that last bit a lot about the Southern service providers. I'm gonna reserve any comments or feedback for now until we hear from the second group. But really great job. And now let's hear from group 2.
Sounds good. Yeah. So for the first question, what type of information we would need? So on top of the demographic that was already mentioned, what we wanted to look at was some of the institutions in the area. So this involves some of the health research that's already conducted on the area, as well as any prevalent issues that might be reoccurring. Another one that we were looking at was potential kind of seasonal illnesses or diseases that might occur. And then finally, also kind of what institutions and industries are already available in the area in terms of health and medical research, so we can find the potential gaps or areas that we feel like could potentially use more research.
Great, really good. And in terms of how you go about gathering the information for the points that you mentioned?
So we will also be interested to see, probably conducting a survey with the people, the residents in the Northern Ontario, to see, we can also classify between the age groups, so include more distributed populations in the survey, like, oh, do they have any diseases that they are normally getting, for example, every year, and then we can get the number from the survey. And then we could sort of see the trend probably, oh, which certain age groups that are probably more prevalent to like certain diseases that happening in the area. For example, if it's flu season, how many people contract the flu into that. And then we will also be looking at the available pharmaceutical industries or healthcare institutions, and then what they have been doing before. For example, if the flu is number is very high in the area, and then we can see, oh, is there any flu vaccine provider or like flu medicines provider? And we'll also be interested to see from the government sources in terms of the demographics to answer our first question about the population. And then we also kind of discuss about age, gender, ethnicity. So like more of a bigger picture that we probably try to get from the government sources. And for the third question, how will we characterize the impact? Just want to be honest here. We haven't really got the time to discuss this together, so anyone feel free to jump in. But I was thinking to see if for the long-term impact, we can also conduct even more surveys, definitely to see if the numbers of certain diseases that was available before actually go down after we do more investment in the healthcare. And for the short-term survey, probably, or short-term impact, I mean, we can also see, oh, does this investment can bring more researchers in this area that can bring more benefits in terms of healthcare in the Northern Ontario. And then, for example, if there's any healthcare institutions or research institutions, will the government give more support or funding? So if that is a positive thing, then it might be one of the key measures that we can use. And anyone feel free to jump in.
That's really great. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I got nothing else.
Great, really great job. I mean, as you both noted, this was a challenging set of questions to answer in a very short time. I thought both groups did a really great job. I think really, if you bring the ideas from both groups together, I think we really captured the gamut of the types of things that we want to explore. Maybe one other thing that perhaps maybe was missing from both groups that come to mind, and this is maybe more of a secondary point, is trying to take a look at, once you're starting to narrow in on some of these areas, is looking at what other leading centers in the world are doing, just to make sure that you are doing something, you're filling in a white space, and you're able to kind of carve out a specific niche so that you're not competing against some of the very best institutes in the world for talent and funding. Along those lines also is looking at the priorities of government especially funding priorities for various programs, let's say in Canada or Ontario, so that we can start to target our proposal to very specific streams of money to get funding. And in terms of the information, you guys really covered a lot of great sources. One thing that we'll often look at when we're trying to understand what's happening in the research space is really looking at the academic literature as well, looking at PubMed, looking at some of the publications that existing researchers in Northern Ontario have begun to generate, to see, are there any emerging strengths? Are there some already niche areas that are starting to emerge that we may want to build on? And you great job in covering the impact in terms of healthcare system utilization, overall population health, changes to the funding environment. There may even be maybe a little bit of a stretch, but often people try to look at maybe impacts on the economy, whether or not these types of investment are able to attract certain businesses, whether it's pharmaceutical companies that want to set up shop to do clinical trials next door, or whether there's even an opportunity to have some spin-offs of companies coming out of certain technologies that may emerge from the research. Who knows? Overall, really great job. I'm really impressed, and I hope that this gives you a little bit of a flavor of the types of projects that we do and the thinking that we go through at Shift Health. So I'll just I'll wrap up my presentation before we move into questions with just some lessons learned. Obviously, when I was in my MBA, I did a case-based MBA. I think most programs are these days, including doing a lot of live cases and working with clients and things of that nature as a part of the program. But still, nonetheless, there were certain things that I didn't really appreciate as much until I actually got into the field. The first one is really just about the intensity of client management. I think in business school, a lot of times when you're kind of interacting with a client, you're kind of setting it up at the beginning, you're understanding what you need to do. You may have some kind of a midpoint checkpoint, and then you're kind of delivering. The reality is sometimes it's almost daily emails, just kind of managing, various dynamics, ensuring that they're aligned on everything. Trying to even something as simple as just setting up meetings or whatever takes up a great deal of time, and just the intensity of client management was something that I didn't fully appreciate. This one is definitely, one that took me some time to really kind of come to terms with, was the influence of a client's organizational politics. Often the recommendations that you have, not often, sometimes the recommendations that you have may not necessarily align with the personal preferences of an individual in the client organization, or there is a certain way of doing things that they're kind of really stuck on, or they have some ideas in their head that may not be necessarily evidence-based or necessarily the best thing for the organization, and really kind of managing some of these politics, and trying to make sure that you're presenting a credible and objective solution while managing some of these kind of personalities, I would say, in a lot of clients can be challenging. Particularly at Shift Health, because we work across so many sectors. One thing is just how much organizational culture differs by sector. Working with government is very different than working with industry. It's different than working with the not-for-profit sector. And being able to be agile and kind of, I guess, shift the way that you work to match that of the client, so that you're kind of moving in step. The agility required to manage surprises, and there's always surprises. You're going to start your week thinking that it's going to look like this, and it's not going to take very long to realize there's all kinds of new things that you're going to have to deal with, whether it's brand new clients coming out with requests for very short-term quick projects to come about, some new surprise happening on a certain project that's going to force you to switch gears midway. Just being prepared for those types of for that type of work. And then finally, I guess the breadth and depth of knowledge that consultants gain. I think that this is really one of the real benefits of management consulting, is you work on so many different projects, problems, clients, sectors, and you have to go deep and really begin to understand what each of these disease areas, regions, what the client is about, what their kind of overall objectives are, and your ability to kind of cross-pollinate these ideas into different projects and bring them to different clients It's really uncanny how much of a wealth of experience you gain as a management consultant. So I'm going to stop there. I've been talking a lot, and just open it up to all of you to see if you have any questions.
Sure, I think we already have first person. Art, so you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much for your great talk. I appreciate. I just was wondering that how hiring look like in your firms. So how many offices do you have in Canada or outside elsewhere? And also how often do you hire? What is the procedure looks like? Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are a Toronto-based firm. While I was actually just chatting with Satyam about this while you guys were in your break. We have our one and only office is in Toronto, although the reality is the vast majority of our business is international. But you know, we have hired, I guess, historically, people have lived in Toronto and had to either move to Toronto or already live there. Although this is something that we'll have to think about as we continue to kind of creep out of the pandemic and start to think about the lessons we've learned about working virtually, which we have been. I'm still working from home here in Toronto. But nonetheless, in terms of just, I guess, our hiring, you know, we hire as needed. We don't necessarily have, I guess, predictable hiring cycles. This year alone, we hired, in the last year or so, we've hired 7 entry-level positions. Probably the most that we've hired in a long time. We're really growing very rapidly right now. Typically what happens is we'll post something on our website, also Twitter, LinkedIn, all of that, just to let people know that we're going through a round. The process goes, people will submit resumes. We'll obviously, you know, review, we'll select people for a first round of interviews, which is a combination of a behavioral interview, you know, typically just, you know, getting to know you and the classic kind of interview questions. Tell me an example of a time when you did this or that, or whatever the case, as well as a written assignment that will have you'll step a step away for an hour or so. We'll give you kind of a problem to think about, and then write 1 page, and then come back and kind of share that with the group and answer some questions. Really, the purpose of this is to, one, see how you think on your feet in a very short amount of time, to assess your writing skills, and as well as your ability to take feedback and how you would kind of react to the feedback that we provide you with. Based on that first round of interviews, we'll select, so usually for that first round of interviews, you know, let's just say that we are collecting about 100 resumes. We'll probably whittle that down to about, let's say 7 or 8 people for that first interview. And then out of that, if they're all good, then everybody will move to the second round. But typically we're looking at about, let's say 4 or so will move on to the second round, where you would be doing a take-home case study. It's a 3-day case. So you let us know, say, okay, I'm going to dedicate these 3 days, send me it at 7 p.m. on Monday, and then you'll return it 3 days later. And we're presenting you with a little bit of a consulting problem, and for you to create a short deck, a 10-slide deck. You'll then come back and present it to the recruitment team and answer some questions. And then based on that, we'll make our hiring decision.
Arzu, do you have anything else to ask?
Yes, I can have a follow-up question. So I'm wondering for example, I have my own 1 page of resume for sending to consulting firms, but I put I only put 1 example of my research and the rest is my leadership. So I was wondering for some firm like a health specific, should I put more of the other research project, or which way I should focus, half and half, or more of the research project that I have done rather than leadership? And I also was wondering if there is, aside from particular, like family, like famous casebook, is there any other resource that you suggest for practicing healthcare questions? Thank you.
So with regards to your first question, I think, really like in my mind, a good resume that we would see, the first thing right off the bat, as I'd noted before, that we hire exclusively people with graduate degrees in the life sciences. So that's just a first kind of a filter that we'd be looking for, either a master's or a PhD in the life sciences. In addition to that, just kind of demonstrating knowledge of and interest in management consulting generally, and whether that is through groups like the Sauder Management Consulting Club, or participating in case studies or case competitions and things of that nature. That often goes a long way. We're looking for somebody that actually knows what consulting is and is very passionate about it. And while we are interested in knowing that, knowing about your research background and some of your strengths, I wouldn't dedicate a great deal to that, and looking at maybe maybe a short section highlighting maybe some high-profile publications you may have, or scholarships you may have received. But at the end of the day, we're not hiring academic. We're not looking for somebody to come in as a researcher, like a bench researcher, as an example. We just need somebody who has that depth of scientific knowledge. And with regards to your second question, well, I would say that the types of cases that we present, both in that written one and the take-home, I don't think that they're similar to what you'd find in other consulting firms, where you can kind of get those case books and you can and practice. They're probably going to be more along the lines of what I shared with you today, more comparable to the actual work that we do. We're less interested in testing on the spot if you're able to estimate how many matchsticks there are in New York City, and more so just seeing if you can work through a real actual strategy consulting project. So I don't know if there's any real resources that I would highlight for you.
Thank you very much. That answered all of my questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. I think there was Shruti to raise her hand. Shruti, do you want to go?
I did, but I think I kind of got my answer. To be honest, Charles, I was wondering that is the undergrad degree or the graduate degree in life sciences non-negotiable? Why? Because I have I started my career in marketing research in the pharma domain. I did that for about half a decade, and then I moved on into consulting, which was totally non-pharma related. And now I think my life's coming back a full circle and getting super interested in getting back into the life sciences, healthcare, pharma sort of domain. And consulting is something that I feel really passionate about. So, and the third level of complexity is that I am not from North America, I'm from India. But because I did my first phase of career with pharmaceutical companies in the North America, so a lot of what you spoke about is very familiar. So yeah, I'm just piggybacking on Arzu's question of career and how you hire and stuff. But I was just wondering if a person like me at all kind of is in a consideration set. And if not, then what would your advice or suggestion be for alternates for me? Yeah.
So unfortunately, and this is something that we occasionally reconsider and think about, but we are very much dedicated to hiring people that have graduate degrees in the life sciences. It really is a value, it's a differentiator for our firm, and it's something that our clients look to and point to as one of the reasons that they hire us. And we want to maintain that ability to not only quite simply say that all of our consulting staff have that depth of understanding of research, but it's also something that we really rely on in a lot of the work that we do, just having that depth of scientific knowledge that one would gain most readily from a graduate degree. With regards to what kind of other types of consulting you may want to explore, I think that if you have experience in the pharmaceutical sector, there are a lot of firms that focus exclusively on pharma, on the pharma sector, advising on various elements, from everything from making regulatory submissions to overall product strategy, and there are many here in Canada, and as well as some of the big multinational firms that also really focus on that area. And based on what you've shared with me, your resume sounds like somebody that they would be interested in looking at.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Danica?
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for putting this on this evening. You keep mentioning and referencing the life sciences, and I'm just wondering how clinically focused that is. And specifically, I'm a nurse and I have a master's in nursing, and life sciences like biotech, that kind of lens. Like, I mean, your own history in genetics and genetic research. I was just curious as to how into the life sciences Shift Health has gone.
When you say how clinically focused, are you asking if our projects start to delve into understanding, say, the operations of a hospital or a clinic, or what exactly are you asking, I guess?
Oh, sure. I'll reframe. Just from your experience in looking for candidates for the license, like clinicians as candidates for help.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think in the past we've definitely interviewed and worked with even medical doctors that were looking to switch gears. It's definitely a background that's of interest to us for sure. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you.
Meanwhile, other people raise their hand. I'm just curious to follow up on the difference, the task given between interview one and like round one and round two. So do you have like access to the public databases, Charles, or is it just you given a couple of like 10-pager and that's the only information that you have to use to come up with slide decks, or that one pager you would describe it?
Yeah, so I think for the first one, especially it's changed now because we used to do this. The first round used to be in the office. We've now, as I noted, we've hired 7 or 8 people in the virtual world, right. And obviously we're not going to, they have access to the internet. The reality of the matter is that first one is less about gathering actual information and evidence, and more about testing the way that you think. Okay. So there's no information out. I mean, like, unless you're going to spend your whole hour trying to find if somebody else did a similar, it would be difficult. But it's really just kind of it's more of a conceptual project. The first one. The second one, definitely, obviously, this is a take-home study, a case that you'd be doing over the course of 3 days. And we would be looking to see some evidence and references and graphs and all of that stuff, at least on some of the slides, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And just like another second question is, how long does the projects are usually on average? Like how long any of the projects is?
It obviously really varies. I'd say probably an average project is going to be something like 4 months or something like that.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. I think next is Natasha.
Yep. Just want to ask Charles about you as a consultant and also a leader at the firm. What is the biggest challenge that a lot of life science or pharmaceutical companies that are facing right now? And what is the next big thing that a lot of these companies are trying to do in the future?
That's a really great question. Obviously, all the firms are different, and it really depends a lot on, what disease area they're in, which markets they're all focused on. But if I were to generalize, I'd have to say that, we're in a place where the health technologies that are being developed are much more complex than they used to be. We're moving into a world where there's a lot more biologics, a lot more, precision medicine that requires companion diagnostics, and cellular therapies, gene therapies, things of that nature. That's really the future. And there's a lot of challenges that come with that, including, obviously, these are very expensive. They only serve a very small population. It's very difficult to generate the evidence that you'd require in advance of a market launch in order to make the case to governments. And we're finding a lot of trends of the need for pharma to reorient the mindset of governments around the world about how to think about the value of these therapies, how to go about assessing their value and assessing the evidence, and rethinking the way that we reimburse and price these therapies to match this new world where we're moving away from this kind of blockbuster small molecules to these very kind of specialized complex advanced medical therapies.
That's very clear. Thank you.
Awesome. I think just to be respectful of Charles' time, I think we can just take the last 2 questions. Lily, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just gonna make this really quick. Thank you so much, Charles, and thank you so much for everybody as well too. This is a quick question actually regarding whether you're looking for consultants who are more just kind of part-times, just kind of wanted to get their kind of feet wet as well too with consulting, but not necessarily making a full transition. Is that a particular option?
So we've never hired a part-time consultant. Historically, we've only hired full-time. Just given the level of investment we need to make in our recruitment cycle, and it's usually to fill a very real need, we would be looking to hire full-time consultants. With that being said, we have worked with people, I guess, that we consider to be associates on a part-time basis, but typically those are individuals who are either very prominent thought leaders in their field that are coming in as subject matter experts on projects, or very well-established consultants that have a strong track record that are able to plug into specific projects.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for answering my question.
No worries, thanks.
Caleb?
Hey, Charles, thanks. That was a lot of fun. So one phrase that you mentioned a lot, and I'm very familiar with working in healthcare, is evidence-based. And I'm just wondering, that's not something that I've necessarily seen as a focus in a lot of other consulting firms. And so I'm wondering, you're in a room full of PhDs. I'm wondering how you balance, the evidence-based focus of a bunch of, PhDs who have an interpretation of evidence with the kind of evidence that strategy consulting or management consulting organizations are typically looking at.
That's a really great question. I think and that goes back to, I guess, an earlier question about what we're looking for in candidates and what we may look for in a resume. I will say the following: you're kind of stereotypical PhD graduate or academic, somebody who would have thrived in a career in academia, would likely not do very well at Shift Health. We've hired people like that in the past and they haven't worked out. And we've learned to figure out early on, I think that person is going to get too stuck on the details. And it's like, no. I mean, like, it's important, obviously, we want things to be evidence-based, but you need to roll it up a little bit. And it's okay if we don't know the answer to all of because PhDs don't think like that. They need all questions, just create more questions and they just keep on going down a rabbit hole. And it's tough, I guess, for us to kind of find that balance of going deep enough without getting lost in the weeds. I think for the most part, a lot of that comes from us just being able to find people that bring that natural balance and really understand how to think about these problems, that business problems are different than science problems, even though we're trying to bring them together, and making sure that we're providing that kind of that guidance all the way along. Good question.
Awesome. I think I'll just close out the questions now. Thank you so much, Charles, for giving us your time. I know it's late on the East Coast, and thank you for everyone attending. And we're happy to have Charles once back again, probably every year, to enlighten us with more students who are interested in career of consulting here on the West Coast. So thanks again, Charles, for joining us for today and answering the questions.
Thank you all. It's my pleasure.